Well, episode 2 for movie leadership lessons with Gabe and Ian. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. We are again meeting to talk about our favorite movies and the lessons that we've learned related to leadership specifically. And we had the privilege of watching and now discussing Empire Strikes Back. Possibly one of the best in the whole saga, in my opinion. Although I do have some favorites in there, but this one might be one of the best. And certainly it really resonates with me simply because I was a little kid when this really came out, and I remember going to see it in the theaters and I was excited. So watching it again just brought back all the excitement. And so Gabe, what did you thoughts? What did you see? What are some lessons that you learned or pulled out from this awesome movie?
Well, if you will, one of the first scenes when Han is actually endangering himself to go find Luke, right, on the frozen planet, and even though they had to close the doors because this is going to be very cold, and they needed to close to protect all the people. He somehow decided to go outside, even though it was very dangerous, right? To find and save Luke because he wasn't back.
Right.
And speaking of leadership, I think this is one of the fundamental, if you will, let's say, manifestation of leadership, of true leadership, like sacrificing or endangering yourself to, for the others and for the team. Take one for the team, right?
Absolutely.
So I think even though he needed to go because he had this price on his head because of Jabba, right? And he needed to go and fix that, but he postponed that to be able to go out and find Luke.
Right.
So I think that's very, precious.
Absolutely. What's interesting, and I picked up on that one too. I will say, there was that moment, just that scene or two just prior to that, where, and obviously there's a love interest there, and that's kind of building. But there's that moment where Leia chases after him, and she says, "You're a natural leader. We need you. We need you for this bigger purpose." And she specifically says, "You have these leadership qualities." And then, he's still like, "Well, okay, but I got to deal with my own stuff." And then when he rises to that occasion, like you said, and he now goes to rescue Luke, and then he's pulled right back in. He doesn't go off and leave. Instead, he stays there with Leia and helps with the whole process and everything. So yeah, it's really interesting how they presented that, where they're like, no, we need you and you're a leader, and then he demonstrates it right there. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. On the other hand, if you think about it, going back to the collective leadership type that the Rebel Alliance had,
yes.
If you think about it, they were closing the gates, even though they knew that they were endangering not only one but two leaders like Luke and Han Solo, right? Both they're somehow part of the leadership, right? But to protect the collective, they make this executive decision, right, to close down the gates. And also, I think this is very interesting regarding the two types of leadership that we discussed in the first episode, right?
Absolutely.
And so most of their decisions are based on the collective interest, not only one or the other, even though they are major figures, right, in the leadership, but they decide to close the gates regardless. So I think that's also interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that constant comparison that you see, which is so interesting. You see this where the rebels are about the cause, about the purpose, and are willing to sacrifice their other leaders for, or make those ultimate sacrifices for the greater good, the greater group, that Rebel Alliance and that kind of thing. And clearly Vader and the Empire is not willing to do that at all. It's soon after that. Well, there's that moment where this is a little bit later, but you see the juxtapose there where the admiral comes to him and says there's an asteroid field, and they went into it, and there's just no way, we can't go in there, we can't make that sacrifice. And Vader's like, don't talk to me about asteroid fields, just make it happen, meaning you need to sacrifice your ships and your people and everything to go after them. So it's just that complete opposite of each other. So interesting.
And in this one, you remember we talked about Vader sacrificing anybody just for, it doesn't matter, for just one mistake. And in this episode, he sacrifices two, like the first admiral and then Captain Ida, right, in the same way. So yeah. they just failed their mission, and he just killed them. So
goes through them like it's nothing,
Yeah.
And what was it's funny. I mean, obviously, that was a pretty clear parent thing to pick up on, but yeah, he kills one admiral. That admiral sees it, and then. And what was so interesting too, there's that moment where they obviously lose the Falcon in the asteroid field, or coming out of the asteroid field, and so that admiral, the second admiral that he's on his second one at that point, and that admiral says, he makes a statement where I'll take full responsibility for it, and I'll talk to Vader, and then the next scene they show him falling out, and he's dead. He's basically been choked. It's just classic kind of, but on that whole next level of this fear-based leadership.
And going over that again in the first, when they invade, the planet, and they're trying to take over the rebels, and you can also see the two sides of leadership again. Like the Empire soldiers and the entire army, they have very strict orders, and they don't even think about going, just 1 degree beyond that, and they need to do exactly what they were told. But on the other hand, in the same kind of battle, the rebels can improvise. And adapt, like the cable thing that Luke did, right? That because they just decided they cannot take on the thick armor, and they need to improvise to do something else. So they have this liberty of deciding for themselves, and not just a centralized direction and do as you're told or you're gonna die sort of thing, like the Empire army has. And you can see that from the first battle, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There's that scene just leading up to that where Princess Leia is even talking to the group, and she's kind of discussing, here's what we're going to try to do, and we're trying to, this is our goal that we're trying to reach, and then she's just kind of like, good luck. And like you said, they're given that ability to improvise and just try to reach this goal. It's more about the goal. It's more about the goal that we're trying to reach collectively, and not how you get there. So yeah. I love that.
And this is so fundamental for teamwork, and for how effective teams and performing teams are, acting in real life, in companies and corporations, and even smaller companies, right? They need to be flexible and adapt and trust each other, so they don't question. When Luke told the other guy, "Hey, we need to do this," like, he was not like an official leader, right? He was not like a general in the army, or he was like a non-formal leader, right? But the other guy just trusted him. So they said, okay, let's do this stuff with the cable, and they did it. And there wasn't any argument, or hey, who are you to say this, or you don't have the authority, or stuff like that. They just did it, and they worked as a team, and they achieve the goal.
Absolutely, yeah. There was no 7 meetings that need to be planned out to discuss that prior, and approval from somebody above and that kind of thing. It was just make it happen. Yeah, I love that. Great.
Also, so then jumping onwards to when Luke gets to Yoda, right, the planet. And I just wanted to, because the first, 20 times I saw the movie, I didn't realize this. But now when you look through these lenses of leadership insights, you see a lot of, interesting stuff. And one of the first things I noticed was when he says, it looks like something out of a dream, like he's set in a completely different environment than what he was used to or what he was expecting. So I think this is very interesting. And then when we are first introduced to Yoda, again, he's part of that environment. He's very different. He's so very different than what you would expect a leader to be, right? And so very different than what you would expect a leader to be, right? And one of the most important characters of the whole saga, right? Yoda is like up there, right? In the top 3, I guess. And he was so small and apparently powerless, right? And the planet was messy and like a jungle and like a mushy thing without any apparent, sense or order. And I noticed this, like Luke was coming from something from, let's say, a civilization, right, level, and going into this dump, and he found Yoda, matching in the same environment. And I think this is very interesting to see how he reacts to all this. How do you see this?
To your point, I saw that too, and I actually made note of that as well. Of Yoda, his presence. He's obviously the top leader of the Jedis, even though there's not many left. But he's obviously in well regard with the Jedis. But he's this tiny little thing that looks so kind of just it's that don't judge a book by its cover. And that kind of thing too. And it's interesting you say that about that you use the word dream, because there's that. This is a little bit later, they keep kind of going back and forth with Yoda in different scenes. And I'm sure you're probably going to get to this, but there's that interaction where, they're trying to pull the X-Wing fighter out of the swamp. And he specifically says, because you don't believe, right? And, and there's that kind of, and it's really all about believing yourself. And there's that prior moment where they're discussing, and he's kind of talking about you're always looking at, ahead, but never in the moment. And so those kind of real strong words of wisdom that really are about believing in yourself and kind of believing in this higher purpose and believing in a greater good, or at least doing something right or going towards the light, and all those things lead to it. So it was I love that, again, it's such a great kind of juxtapose of the two, where they keep flipping back and forth between what's Vader doing over here with the dark side and Empire, and what's going on with the rebels, and then Yoda and the Force and the light side and that kind of thing too. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I love like this part of the whole saga. For me, is one of my favorites, and how the way that we get to know Yoda and who he really is, and the surprise that Luke has when he actually understands how powerful and who actually Yoda is in the whole picture, right? For me, it's one of my favorites of all the, not only the first 3, but all the movies in the saga. And in this in the very first exchange of communication between them, I see this again. I never noticed this before. This is the first time I noticed when Luke says, "I'm looking for a great warrior," and Yoda says, "Words not make one great." And this is, I mean, when I heard this, oh my God, this is so powerful, right? Because Luke says, "I'm looking for a great warrior," and he says, "Words does not make one great," right? And I think this is amazing. And then he asks Luke about his purpose, right? Why wish you become Jedi, right? Like, why are you looking to do this? And Luke says mostly because of his father, right? And then, as you mentioned, like the judgment, bilateral judgment, let's say, that Luke has about Yoda, and Yoda says that he has no patience. He's always in the future, as you mentioned, and he cannot teach him because he's not really committed, right? And also, like the first, I would say the most re remarkable and memorable, phrases of all Star Wars when Luke says, "Okay, I'm gonna try," and then Yoda says, "No, try not, do or do not, there is no try." And I think also this has a very fine nuance on it, because at first glance you would say, come on, you have to try things, right? You cannot just do or not do. But I don't think it's about that. In my, let's say, revised opinion on this, it's not about not giving uh, tries to do stuff. It's about the commitment to those tries. It's about the commitment when you really want to do something, when you feel that that is your purpose, then you should not think of them as tries. You should think of every iteration as, I want to do this, I want to achieve this, and I think it's about the commitment. That's what Yoda wants to say about this. But this is one of my favorite, conversations um, in all Star Wars.
It's interesting because in the leadership that we talk about, we do talk about and we think about, or we try to push for, that it's important to have practice and deliberate practice and all these things, and that's what you think about. It's kind of try, but there's more to it. Like you said, it's really is the do or do not. Like, there is no try. I love that as well, and when I say that often to my kids, even, like, if you're going to do it or you're not going to do it, there is no, I'm just going to try. And it really is more about believing in yourself and having purpose and having meaning, and the importance of that, that message. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's outstanding. And especially when you really start to think about it in a leadership standpoint. Yeah, it's just brilliant.
And also, to your point, it's about faith, as you said, and the belief in yourself and in what's possible to achieve. When Luke says it's too big, like, okay, you're asking for impossible, it's too big. But then Yoda introduces us to the force concept, right, and what the force is. And I really have something that I find is very interesting here. Recently, when I say recently, I mean in the last 20 or 30 years, there is a big, let's say, development into the quantum physics science that talks about the Higgs field. I don't know how much you know about this, but I was very curious, and I read a lot about this. And basically, when you read about the Higgs field, you discover almost exactly what they were talking about in the Star Wars saga about the Force. So basically, in real life, the Higgs field is the force field that gives mass to all the particles in the world. So it's crazy if you think about it. When I saw that again, and I was considering it's so peculiar, right? But this is not science fiction. Actually, they're talking in a way about the science facts, even if they didn't know it at that time, I believe. But
Yeah.
they discovered the Higgs boson at the the large, how do you call it? The LHC science facility in Geneva, right? Where they're researching particles, and they're bombarding particles against each other. And they discovered in 2012 the Higgs boson, which is they call the God particle that gives mass, right, to all the other particles. And it's crazy if you think about it.
It really is very strange how the overlap of sci-fi that's going on with, the reality and that kind of thing too. And I think we talked about this even a bit, in the last conversation about, obviously, George Lucas put a lot of effort in studying things and kind of figuring out his story. But it's fascinating how some of the things that he was on that, that are things that we're still trying to work on or talk about today. I mean, that he had already figured out this huge difference in how leadership should be versus should not be. And, this is still an ongoing conversation that people are constantly being trained on and consulted with and all of that too. Yeah. And the whole aspect of the force and all of that too. I mean, it's, all matter is made up of neutrons, protons, electrons. It's just energy, which is it's pretty amazing. So fascinating stuff for sure. I mean, we can nerd out on the science stuff. So man, there was something else. So what about Lando? Thoughts on Lando? Lando is this, again, kind of smuggler, scoundrel kind of person who was, on that same level as Han Solo, and obviously now has become this leader of the Cloud City, this, mining community and that kind of thing too. Thoughts on that? What did you feel you got from him?
Yeah, I think I got the same, if you want, pattern as when Han Solo became, let's say, one of the leaders in the Rebel Alliance. Again, an informal leader, but it was in the same way. Like he was a hustler, and then he turned in the way towards the cause, right, and helping the rebels. And Lando is doing the same thing, right? At first, he struck a deal with Vader, but then when he realized like the Dark Force is really bad and they're gonna hurt a lot the rebel union, then he turns back and helps the rebels. So I think he's also, in a way, an informal leader that is attracted to the Dark Force, but then goes back and turns good, right?
It's that, and I think every leader is faced with that. It's that balance, right, of having to make those decisions between business or, your shareholders versus your customer or your employees, and great leaders have to sometimes make decisions one way or another and help people understand on either side. And there is that balance. But yeah, I mean, it was this example of a leader being faced with that ultimate kind of decision, and then to your point, I mean, Vader even says, I've changed the deal, pray I don't change it even further, because he's like, what, I thought Leia and Chewie were going to stay here, and now you're trying to take them away. And, so there's just that realization that he has that he went down the wrong path and he needs to go the other way. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And just before that, I want to touch just a bit about Luke when he decides to go to Lando, because they have this argument between Luke and Yoda and Obi-Wan, when they clearly say he's not ready, right? He needs more training and is in danger of going to the dark side because he's not, fully at that level, or he might be killed by Vader because he's a lot more powerful at that point. So, and I wanted to say that again, from a leadership standpoint, Luke, yes, he's not ready. He doesn't have all the tools or resources or skills. However, he makes an executive decision about going and helping, his teammates, right? Even though he doesn't have all the knowledge, he doesn't have, he's going into unknown, basically. But he's making this decision for like an optimist and for the overall good of the team and the Rebel Alliance. And he's in a way disobeying even one of the opinions of one of the leaders of the overall Jedi universe, right? And he decides to go there regardless.
Yeah, it's another, that kind of decision-making situation that leaders are faced with all the time, and having to, balance, sacrifice, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So interesting. I think that's what makes the Empire Strikes Back so appealing. Is it's not just the normal kind of trajectory of, here's this problem, they solve it, overcome it, and then everybody's happy at the end. It's a lot of like, okay, it can go this way or that way, and there's a lot of decision making there, and good and bad, and that kind of the conflict that continues to happen. So
Yeah.
I think that's what makes that movie so interesting. And again, a lot of reality of what I think leaders are faced with.
Yeah. And just another thing about, we touched upon the thing that in this Rebel Alliance, in this collective type of leadership, even the smaller, apparent smaller, levels, let's say, of characters have important roles, and also that they stick for each other, and they, help each other. And I want to touch upon, Chewbacca going to search for 3CPO that was missing, right? And he was just a droid, right? And apparently nobody, right? They can make them, like, in a factory. But however, he chooses to go and search and, fight the little guys in the melting room, and he manages to grab him and to bring him back to the team. And I also think, again, this is that part of the collective leadership and teamwork and helping each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, valuing a droid on this side, and then you got again that juxtapose there, or the difference there on the dark side. Vader went through 2 admirals like it was nothing, and admirals are, I mean, his like top people, and just killed him off, and just willing to easily appoint somebody else, to the position, versus the value even in a droid is there, and they're not willing to sacrifice them in that same way. Yeah, it's just so well thought out, and just such a great example of leadership as well.
Yeah. What do you think of the last battle about Vader and Luke? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, again, it was just, that's where this kind of came to a head there, where they were obviously, I mean, it's such a intense battle, and was on that whole nother level. I mean, we saw that lightsaber battle in Star Wars and A New Hope, between Obi-Wan and Vader, and it was cool, and it was exciting. But this was like this whole other level of battle scene, of just going through all these different, locations and places, and it just building and going up and down, and it was just, and it was clear it wasn't just a fight with the swords. It was a fight of, like, you could tell it was like good and bad fighting. And then obviously, Vader drops his bomb at the end that, you're my son, come join me. And he clearly didn't want to just straight out defeat Luke. He wanted to beat him down enough to where then he can pull him over to the dark side, which kind of speaks to like the idea of like this evil leadership, of like really just take over to my side, instead of the purpose is just very different. And so I don't know, that's what I got from it. You, anything else?
I think you touched upon a very, very brilliant side, that it was not only a battle of weapons, but also a battle of, even more so, a battle of beliefs and values. And of course, it's very apparent the differences between the two. And I think the high point of the battle is at the end, actually, when Vader says there is no other way except for you to join me, in a way, right? But Luke finds another way by just letting go. And I think this letting go, it's amazing. I don't know if George Lucas think about that when he did it, but I think he did. because it shows like an incredible brilliance in movie making and in the scenario as well, because he lets go because he had faith, and he lets go, and apparently he didn't die, right? Because he somehow got into that tunnel, and then he was saved at the end by the team. But I think this moment when Vader says, "Come with me to rule the galaxy together," and he says, "It's the only way," and Luke says, "No," and he lets go. And I think this is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.